Hello, I'm the Nordic Investor, welcome back. I'm Swedish and I moved to Brazil over 5 years ago, and in this channel I talk about my life here in Brazil and also how I've stopped working and live off my investments. And in today's video I want to talk about the 10 things that I found strange when I moved here to Brazil. Now this isn't a criticism of Brazil, this is just me highlighting the things that were different and took time for me to get used to when I moved to Brazil. But actually, having lived here now for over 5 years, most of these things now are normal to me and I don't even think about them anymore. So let's begin. Okay, so the first strange thing is the amount of kissing and hugging that you do here in Brazil. I'm not just talking about greeting close friends, I'm talking about greeting colleagues at work, business clients, neighbors, acquaintances. And so with most of these, if you meet a female, you kiss her on both cheeks. Now for me, being Swedish, that was something very different, because in Sweden you just shake hands, there's very little hugging or kissing, and so this was something that I really had to get used to. Now Brazil is a big country, and so there are parts where you do less of this. And I noticed that particularly in the south, where you have kind of lots of German immigrants, there's less of this and there's more just handshaking. But in general, there is a lot more kissing and hugging when you greet and also when you leave here in Brazil. Now sticking to the subject of social interaction, the second strange thing that I found was people arriving late to meetings and to parties. Sweden in general, it's important that you arrive on time to everything, to business meetings, to parties and other social events. But here in Brazil, it's more accepted that you arrive late. Now in business environments, it's less so. So there people are usually on time or 10-15 minutes late. But when you come to social interactions, so parties, there it's more acceptable to arrive an hour or 2 hours late. So this is something that I had to get used to. So actually, when we arrived in Brazil and we went to our first party, we arrived on time, but actually the people organizing the party weren't even ready. They weren't even expecting people to arrive on time. So actually in the end we kind of helped them organize the party a bit, putting out plates and cups and stuff. And actually what we noticed was that most people arrived half an hour late to the party. Obviously, again, it depends on where you live in Brazil, and there are certain areas where people are more punctual than others, but in general this is what to expect. So if you get an invite to parties, it's okay to arrive an hour late, and that's actually what the people inviting you expect you to do. Okay, so now the third strange thing is the fact that lunch is the most important meal for Brazilians. So in general, lunch needs to be hot, so they don't like eating just a sandwich or a salad, and also they like to sit down and take the time to eat lunch. So most Brazilians, they take an hour lunch break and they like to go to restaurants. Some even drive home to eat lunch at home at lunchtime, and some bring their lunch with them to work and then they heat it at work. But this culture that we have in Northern Europe, where you just grab a quick sandwich or a salad and you sit eating it quickly at your desk and then start working again, that's quite rare here in Brazil. And then at dinner time, what Brazilians do is they can have a sandwich or a salad and just something lighter. So basically it's the opposite or what you do in kind of Northern Europe. Now this is something else that I had to get used to. This one took a long time to get used to. But actually now I've got used to it, and I prefer having the main meal at lunchtime, because having a big meal at dinner and then going to bed with a full stomach, for me kind of feels a bit strange now. So now I actually prefer the Brazilian way. And now sticking to the subject of food, the fourth thing that I found strange was the fact that most Brazilians, they eat rice and beans every day. And they obviously add more things to it, so they eat some chicken or beef and lettuce and vegetables, but it's very common to have rice and beans every day. And for me, I still haven't got used to that. I mean, I like rice and beans, but I can't have it every day. So if you go to restaurants in Brazil, a lot of these restaurants are buffet restaurants, and Brazilians love buffets. and they will nearly always serve rice and beans as an option. So this was another difference, because in Sweden, you have buffets, but they're not that common. But for example, in the town that I live here in Brazil, I would say 70-80% of the restaurants are buffet restaurants. And now I actually prefer buffet restaurants, because it means you can get the food quicker. You just go into the restaurant, choose a table, and then go and serve yourself at the buffet. And usually these buffets, they weigh the plates after you've chosen the food. So it's a cost per kilo unless you take lots of food, in which case in a lot of restaurants it's a fixed price. Okay, so the fifth strange thing that I found in Brazil is the fact that people brush their teeth 3 times a day. So they brush their teeth at breakfast, lunch and dinner. So people go to work, a lot of them take with them a toothbrush to work, so they can brush their teeth in the bathroom at work after lunch. Now, this was actually a habit that I picked up really quickly and I liked, because actually I kind of feel it's good to go and brush your teeth after lunch, to just kind of remove any food that's stuck in between your teeth or anything. So this was actually one thing that I didn't have problems adapting to. Okay, so kind of moving on from food and oral hygiene and moving on to living in Brazilian houses, the 6th strange thing that I found is the fact that when you go to the toilet, you put the used toilet paper in a rubbish bin next to the toilet and not down the toilet. Now this applies to all bathrooms, so at work, at home, and it's to do with not clogging up the sewage system. Now this was strange to me, but not totally strange, because I'd already visited other countries where you have to do the same. But for some people who haven't experienced this before, like my parents when they came for the first time to visit us, it's something you have to explain to them, and they kind of react like, oh, that's a bit weird. But after a while you kind of just get used to it. So basically there's a small rubbish bin in every bathroom next to the toilet. And actually one of my European friends who lives here in Brazil, he's got a house fairly close to me, he didn't accept this. He's pretty stubborn, and so he put all the toilet paper down his toilet. He did not want to use these rubbish bins, but very quickly his sewage pipe got clogged and he had to call a plumber over to fix it. So it kind of seems that this rule really needs to be followed in order not to have problems. Okay, so number 7 is gas to your house. Now, I'm not talking about petrol here, I'm talking about liquid gas that you use for cooking and also heating your water. Now, a lot of houses in Brazil, they don't have gas pipes leading into the house that supplies gas. So instead you have to buy gas cylinders, which you leave outside the house, and then you connect a gas hose to those cylinders. And that supplies the gas for your oven and your stove, and also for your hot water heater. Now for me this is just slightly annoying, that you're constantly having to order new gas cylinders. Someone has to be home to let in the delivery guy, who will then pick up the old gas cylinder and put a new gas cylinder in there. And then you also have the chance that one day you kind of forget to change the gas, and so you kind of run out of gas, and then you have to call the delivery guy and ask him to come quickly because you have no gas to take a shower or to cook your food. But now we kind of have a good system in place. We have 2 gas cylinders, and so we connect one, and then when that runs out we connect the second one and I order a new gas cylinder. So now we haven't had any gas shortages or anything, but it just takes a bit more time because you're having to call this delivery guy and open for him and so on. But if you live in apartment buildings, for most of them you don't actually have to worry about this because it's taken care of by the apartment manager. So number 8 is dogs. So Brazilians love their dogs. I mean, lots of cultures do. I love dogs as well. But if you travel to the countryside and the smaller towns in Brazil, you'll see that nearly every house has at least one dog. In the cities it's a bit less, because a lot of people live in apartment buildings, and so it's a bit more complicated. But in the countryside it's dog crazy. But one thing you do notice in the countryside is that a lot of these dogs, they're just loose, they're walking around on the streets, and that's kind of 2 reasons. First of all, people in general just more relaxed about their dogs, so they let their dogs leave their garden and walk around on the streets, and then the dog kind of comes back when they want to eat and when they want to sleep a bit, and the rest of the time they just are out on the streets playing with other dogs. But then secondly, you've got a lot of abandoned stray dogs as well. Now we actually have 2 dogs, so we adopted both of them. They were stray dogs that we found in the neighborhood, and we just took them in and started looking after them. So this is another cultural difference, because in Sweden and England and so on, you don't see many dogs out and about walking loose on the road, and if they are, generally charity or the council kind of picks them up. But here in Brazil, it's very common to see lots of dogs walking about, and so obviously you have to be a bit careful when you're driving around with your car that you don't hit the dogs. But there are charities here in Brazil who help these stray abandoned dogs try and find them a new home. It's just in a lot of cases they kind of get overwhelmed because there are so many. But then also you have to be a bit careful that you don't assume that all dogs on the streets are abandoned, because like I said, a lot of owners, they just let the dogs out a bit and they actually have a home. So for example, when we adopted our 2 dogs, we checked very carefully first that these actually didn't have homes and they were actually homeless and they needed adopting. So okay, so number 9 is schools. So here in Brazil, kids in general go to school in the morning or in the afternoon. So school in the morning starts around 7 and finishes at lunchtime around 12 or 1. And then the kids are kind of free the whole afternoon. Obviously they have to do their homework, but they have no more school in the afternoon. All kids can go to school just in the afternoon, so from lunchtime until 6, 7 in the evening. This is totally different to what I'm used to, because in Sweden, you go to school from 8 in the morning until 3, 4 in the afternoon. So what this means is that parents who work, they need to find people to look after their kids in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on when the kid goes to school. But in a lot of schools there are options for kids to do extra activities after school or in the morning, so the parents can kind of leave their kid at school the whole day. So for example, my daughter, who goes to school here in Brazil, she goes to school in the morning, so she starts school just after 7 and finishes at 1 o'clock. So she doesn't eat lunch at school. She has 2 short breaks where she can have some snacks, but she eats lunch with us at 1 o'clock, and we either go home or we eat at a restaurant. And then she's got the afternoon free. Obviously she needs to do her homework, and then she has some other activities now and again, some sports lessons and so on. So going to school in the mornings means that the kids have to wake up very early. So my daughter has to wake up at 6 in order to get to school at 7. Or if kids go to school in the afternoon, then they get home pretty late, because they'll finish school around 6 or 7 in the evening. Now I'm not sure which school system is better. In terms of the number of hours at school, I counted actually it's not a big difference, because they don't have this big lunch break, the kids here in Brazil, while I had, an hour's lunch break in school in Sweden. So actually the total time in school isn't that big of a difference. Okay, so number 10, so the last strange thing about Brazil is paying in installments, which they call parcelamento. So in Brazil, you can pay for most things in installments. So if you go to stores to buy clothes, appliances, go to the pharmacy, even some supermarkets. So when you come to the checkout, you can choose to pay up front or spreading that over installments, which can be 3 to 10 months. And this is very common to do, so most people do it. Now I know in America and Europe you can do that, usually with kind of more expensive items. But here in Brazil you can kind of do it with anything. So even if you're just spending a few dollars, you're able to spread that over a few months if you want. Now, at the beginning I found this a bit strange and a bit difficult to manage my expenditure, because I was spreading everything over a number of months. Some installments were just 3 months, or other installments were 10 months. But then after a while I got used to it, and now I just kind of do this with bigger items, and the rest I just pay up front. To pay in installments, you have to use a credit card here in Brazil, And also you have to be a bit careful whether the installments are with interest or without interest. Now usually stores offer both options. If you want to pay over a couple of installments, it's interest free, but if you want to spread it over a longer period of time, then there's interest attached to those installments. And so when you come to checkout, usually they ask you, do you want this parcelamento? And I say yes, and then usually I just say I want the maximum without interest. And finally, you just have to be a bit careful sometimes when you look at the price of things in the store. They advertise the installment price. So they show in big figures what each installment will be, and then below that in smaller writing they write the total value. So don't get confused and think things are really cheap when actually you're looking at the price of just one installment to pay for the item. I remember doing that once or twice when I moved here. So just make sure you're not just looking at the cost of one installment, and you're actually looking at the total cost of that product. Okay, so I hope this was useful to you guys. Like I said, with most of these things, I got used to them pretty quickly. There's still one or two which I totally haven't adapted to, like eating rice and beans every day. Let's see if I'll ever be able to do that. So if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel. Got any comments or questions, just leave it in the commentary below. So thanks for watching, until next time.